19 Board of County Commissioners meeting. I'm Kate Flavin, Public Information Officer with Sedgwick County. This morning we have a few announcements to share. So first I'd like to invite Preston to talk about Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to briefly update you on Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month. I'm Preston Gehring. I'm the Preventive Health Director with the Sedgwick County Health Department. During National Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month, celebrated each May, the nation turns its attention to teen pregnancy prevention and the great strides that have been made over the last 20 years. There have been advances in reducing teen pregnancy, but progress is still needed to close the racial and ethnic and geographic disparities in teen birth rates in the United States. Per the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, teen pregnancy and childbearing bring substantial social and economic costs through immediate and long-term impacts on teen parents and their children. For example, teen childbearing in the United States costs taxpayers, federal, state, and local taxpayers, at least $9.4 billion in 2010 due to increased health care and foster care and lost tax revenue because of lower educational attainment and income among teen mothers. In addition, pregnancy and birth are significant contributors to high school dropout rates among girls. Only about 50% of teen mothers receive a high school diploma by 22 years of age, whereas approximately 90% of women who do not give birth during adolescence graduate from high school. Teen pregnancy prevention is one of the CDC's top 7 priorities, or what they consider winnable battles in public health. So the CDC encourages prevention partners, schools, and other youth-serving organizations to amplify teen pregnancy prevention efforts through a variety of mediums and efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here this morning. We appreciate it.
Preston.
Oh, excuse me. Commissioner Cruz has a comment. I apologize.
You know, as a teen mom at 19 years old, I appreciate the efforts that you do because I know firsthand how hard it is to get your life together. Luckily, I had a good support system, and so look at me now. But I am a product of being a teen mom, and so I think, you know, just acknowledging that there is a problem and making sure that we handle it appropriately is to be commended. So I appreciate your efforts.
Very glad to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, and Joan has an update for us as well.
Good morning, Chairman Dennis and Commissioners. I'm here because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want to make sure that we keep the conversation around suicide and suicide prevention efforts visible and present. So in Sedgwick County, we lost 99 lives to suicide in 2018, and we're on pace this year to be even higher in number. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death for people over the age of 25, and the second leading cause for individuals between the age of 15 and 24, second only to accidental deaths such as vehicle accidents and other such. So mental illness is, I just want to make sure that people recognize that mental illness is not a character flaw, it's not a choice, it's a brain disease, no different than health conditions or diabetes, but we don't talk about it in the same way. We don't have a red nose or red day awareness event for mental illness. We don't have amber alerts or silver alerts when somebody is contemplating suicide. But we do know that mental illness and suicide don't discriminate by race, by age, by religious preference, or any other demographic factor. So important for us to keep having this conversation. So why is Mental Health Awareness Month important? It's important because many people who are contemplating suicide will show some symptoms of their despair, such as statements of hopelessness, no plans for future goals, chronic tearfulness, and it's going to take more than just the behavioral health professionals to curb the rate of suicide in our community. So it's important that people be aware that they can have an impact, they can make a difference, they can ask somebody how they're doing, they can simply say, I care, can I get you help? talking about it is really vital. So we have classes that we can offer to the community that teach people to recognize mental illness and how to intervene, but really showing that you care, talking with somebody who looks like they're in despair is the most effective intervention we could do as community members. So ComCare has a suicide prevention hotline. Anybody can call it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 660-7500. And if you're been talking with somebody who is having thoughts of suicide, you could either call for assistance or take them there for assistance, and we will take the lead in trying to help that person through that moment of despair. So given it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and this week is also Public Service Recognition Week, I want to do a big shout out to the ComCare workforce. They do admirable and difficult work every day. I'm really proud to lead the organization, but I'm even prouder of the people we hire and who work with those who need assistance. And I know it is Public Recognition Week. I wanted to make sure that I had mine as well. I appreciate public servants because they do important work. So thank you for letting me continue the conversation around mental illness and suicide.
Thank you, Joan. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you for the work that you do. And I haven't even mentioned this, but I asked Joan to put together some stats and some things that would really work in our community that we aren't already doing, and I just appreciate, I haven't even shared it with them yet, so she put together a great little presentation for me to kind of chew over the next few weeks. I will be heading down to Texas in June to see the model down there, so I really appreciate what you do, Joan, and thank you so much for getting that to me, and I look forward to, I'll be sharing it with you guys soon.
Thank you. And thanks, Joan, for what you do. Truly, if you recall from our legislative agenda this year, behavioral health was the top issue on our legislative agenda. Unfortunately, we got nowhere with it this year, so I'm certain it's going to be a top issue next year on our legislative agenda once again, because this is a very important issue.
It is an important issue. I just want to indicate that while the ones from the county didn't get traction, we did get some traction on some other issues through our association and our advocacy work, so I'd be happy to share that with you at some point.
Very good. Thank you, Joan.
All right, and finally, Cody Sharvett with Emergency Management has an update for us as well.
Morning, Cody. Is it going to stop raining?
Good morning, Mr. Commissioner, or Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We hope so. There is still a 60% chance for more rain later today, up to around 0.4 of an inch on top of what we already got. The rainfall yesterday varied widely by where you were in the county. I think officially at the airport they were around 1.7 inches. Down in the Mulvane area they got over 5 inches. So as you might imagine, that created more flooding issues in certain areas than it did in others. Generally speaking, most of the flooding issues have been confined to the southern tier of the county, as well as some in the areas of northwest Sedgwick County. We've had a lot of roads that were barricaded overnight by Sedgwick County Public Works, Wichita Public Works, and the townships that were responsible for those roads. I don't have a complete list for you. We can work on that and get that out later if that's needed. The problem with that is these are not manned barricades, so if somebody goes along and pushes them out of the way because the water is receded, we won't know that until crews get back out to pick those barricades up. So it's kind of hard to give you an actual snapshot in time of this is what's closed right now. We just know what was closed throughout the evening. One of the things that was closed that created some additional problems was the turnpike. It affected at one point, all southbound traffic was stopped at the south interchange here in Wichita from 47th Street South. Nobody was allowed to go down to even as far as Oklahoma. And then northbound traffic was diverted at the Oklahoma line as well. At one point, before they stopped them in Wichita, they were allowing them to get off in the Mulvane interchange. And then that created a lot of problems because people were suddenly on roads that they were unfamiliar with trying to get around the flooding, and they ended up driving into floodwaters. That led to a lot of problems for Mulvane fire especially. They had one swiftwater rescue where we sent crews down to assist in the very northern tier of Sumner County, and thankful to say that person was rescued successfully. The current situation as far as flood warnings around the county, we have several in effect. For one for the Nenaskaw River at Peck that includes Clearwater and southern Sedgwick County. That one's going to last until late Thursday night. The Big Ark River at Haven, which does have some downstream effects in northwestern Sedgwick County near Mount Hope. Big Ark River at Derby until Saturday afternoon, and the Big Ark at Mulvane until Sunday morning. And also the Little Ark at Sedgwick, which affects northern Sedgwick County as well. I can get into specifics on those, but I'm trying to keep this high level for now, and if you'd like to ask any specific questions, we can get into that. At this point, we do not have any resources committed to actively, mitigating any flood emergencies or flood responses, other than the occasional vehicle stuck in water that we'll send either a police officer out on or a fire truck out on to escort people out away from their vehicles. Mulvane indicated that they do have some residents who are surrounded by water, and so they're walking in or boating in to assist them with evacuation, but nothing that's life-threatening at this point. So I could get way deeper into the weeds, but I'm going to leave it there for now and see if you have any specific questions.
Very good. How high is Cheney Lake? If you remember, a year ago we had to start letting water out even though it was flooding.
The last time I looked at the Cheney Lake level was around 2 o'clock this morning, and it was at 1,422 feet. When it gets close to 1429, that's the top of the flood pool, and that's when they start getting nervous and need to release additional waters into the Ninnasquan Channel. We're not close to that yet. So,
good. Okay, Mr. Spears.
Mr. Chairman, David Spears, Director of Public Works. Just to chime in a little bit, we did have most of our field personnel out all night. The hardest hit areas were up around Andale and then also down around Mulvane, Derby. Greenwich Road between 111th and 119th, parts of it were underwater by 5 feet. So it's a serious situation out there. This is not just a little bit of water running over the roads, it's a lot. And so we're going to leave the barricades out, and if the prediction of more rain is right, we'll be out again all night tonight, maybe barricading more roads. So just wanted to let you know that.
Very good. All right, well, Cody, thank you. We've got most of our emergency management here, so we probably ought to put them back at work. They got some stuff to do.
Agreed.
I don't see any other questions. Thanks for being here this morning.
All right, and on the agenda this morning, Commissioners, we have 3 proclamations, various board appointments. You'll receive an update from the Kansas African American Museum, a consideration for property tax relief, a grant for the Regional Forensic Science Center. We're going to set the date for 3 public hearings involving the Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department, and you'll receive a presentation about the 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and finally, a report of the Board of Bids and Contracts. So without further information to share, Chairman, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone that's joined us here in the audience and those who are joining us on TV or online today. Normally I'd wait until other at the end of the meeting, but I think probably a lot of people that are watching wonder why that there's a fire helmet in front of Commissioner Cruz and in front of myself this morning, and that's because they are our helmets. They have our names on them. On Saturday, both Commissioner Cruz and I attended an all-day training session to learn how to be firefighters. And so we performed CPR. Commissioner Cruz performed CPR for 18 minutes and did not save her.
With a team, not by myself.
They didn't save their person. My team performed CPR for 10 minutes, and we did save our person. So.
It was so enlightening to see just what our emergency professionals do, and to work that hard for 18 minutes and be told that our person had died. That was kind of an eye-opener, and I hear that that's sort of a short amount of time to do CPR. So a lot of times it's 30 minutes to an hour. So if you can imagine that, it makes me, and we had a team of like 5 people, so if you can imagine having 2 people doing that, my hand was bruised. I mean, it's the real deal. So I really appreciate what we got to do. I have a new appreciation for our emergency medical professionals, and I appreciate Don Boone for keeping me safe. He was my shadow all day.
Very good. A couple other things that we got to do that day besides CPR. We went over and they have a trailer house that luckily they let us walk through it with no smoke in it, so we'd see what it looked like inside. And then they filled it up with smoke. We were in full gear with face masks and everything on, and we had to rescue 2 bodies that were inside of there and bring them back out. Did you rescue 3?
We had to rescue 3. You must have left one.
I thought one of them was your partner.
Oops. Uh-oh.
Yeah, maybe we missed one. Anyway, from there we went over and we cut up a car with the Jaws of Life. And you talk about something that's heavy. Pick up Jaws of Life and try and hold it and rescue somebody out of a car. We actually got to cut up a couple cars. And then from there, my team went over and they have some shipping containers set up that they really set a fire in. And you don't go straight into the fire. You've got to drag this big heavy hose around about 3 corners before you actually arrive at the fire. And then you get to put it out. So actually our helmets kind of smell like smoke from going into those facilities. But it was an enlightening experience to know exactly what our first responders do each and every day. We thank them sincerely from the bottom of our heart for what they do. And it was an experience that I hope our other commissioners get to share with us in the future. So as I said, normally I'd put that during other and said at the beginning of the meeting, but since we have helmets in front of us, everybody's sitting here wondering why that we have that, so I wanted to explain that. So with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order for May 8th, 2019. Madam Clerk, next item.
Invocation to be observed by a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Present.
Commissioner Cruz.
Present.
Commissioner Howell.
Present.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Present.
Chairman Dennis.
Present. Next item, please.
Public agenda.
I don't have anyone scheduled to speak on public agenda this morning, but if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak, now would be an opportunity. Seeing no one, next item, please.
Consideration of minutes. Item A, regular meeting minutes of April 3rd, 2019.
Thank you. Commissioners, everyone's had an opportunity to review the minutes for April 3rd, April 10th, and April 17th. All commissioners were present during all 3 of those meetings. We've all reviewed them. I move that we approve all 3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Proclamations. Item D, proclamation declaring National Bike Month.
Thank you. Commissioners, I have a proclamation to read. Whereas the Health and Wellness Coalition of Wichita, Bike Walk, Wichita, and other community partners have collaborated to recognize National Bike Month in our community. And whereas for more than a century, the bicycle has been an important part of the lives of most Americans and is a viable, environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent form of recreation and exercise. And whereas the education of cyclists and motorists as the proper, safe operation of bicycles is important to ensure the safety and comfort of all users in an effort to reduce accidents and injuries. And whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve residents' health and well-being, quality of life, community spirit, and reduction of pollution and congestion, now therefore be it resolved that I, David T. Dennis, Chairman of the Sedgwick County Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners do hereby proclaim May 2019 as National Bike Month and encourage the use of bicycles as well as education about the ways to safely share the roads and walkways. Move to approve this proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye, and this is accepted by Jack Murphy, a volunteer coordinator for Bike Walk Wichita. Welcome, Jack.
Well, thank you for this. I accept this in the name of all the volunteers that have helped to make Bike Month happen again this year. Bike Month happens every May. We have activities for riders of all experience levels, whether it's Bike Month Bingo, which is going on all month, or you can ride 100K in the Wicked Wind later in the month. We know that communities where more people riding bicycles more safely are good places, better places for people to live, work, and play. And we know that bicycling, there's something magical about bicycling, whether you've been a bicyclist all your life like myself, or like the young girl on Sunday at Open Streets who took her first ride without training wheels. We end up with a smile on our faces. I know that for me, some of my best thinking comes when I'm riding my bike, bike commuting. And we also know that children who are active are better learners. And so for Bike Month, we have a lot of different activities. They're on our website, which is bikemonthict.org, and a Facebook page. We have events all through the month, including on Sunday, we have a Mother's Day ride starting at 3 o'clock at Exploration Place, and that's open to everybody. Everybody is welcome for that, as well as we'll be doing Bike to Work Day on the 17th, Friday the 17th, and anyone who rides their bike to work can get free breakfast and free lunch. And again, those details are on the website there. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner?
Jack, thanks for accepting that, and thanks for addressing this. I'm reminded that seems like we've migrated into a more bike-friendly community overall. I know that Sedgwick County Park is just packed all the time with biking on the weekends and a smaller scale, not the 20-mile things. But I'm reminded also that now Council Member Becky Tuttle worked with her about 3 years ago, and she really spearheaded getting the bike share.
Yes.
And we talked about how our community probably wasn't willing to have a government-supported bike effort on that, and she was really good in she found Blue Cross Blue Shield to sponsor it for 3 years or whatever. And so it's not a taxpayer-funded deal, and apparently the owners of the bike share are amazed that we're like the top 2 or 3 in the country on usage, and they keep expanding it to WSU and whatever else. So I know we've worked through trying to have bikers cooperate with traffic and pedestrians, but I think we're getting through it in a responsible manner. So I think thanks for all you guys do in trying to help improve that. So
yeah, I appreciate the government support of things like the bike share ICT. It takes cooperation among all kinds of groups to be able to move these forward. So appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Jack.
Jack, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item E, proclamation declaring Sedgwick County a Census 2020 partner.
Thank you. Commissioners, I have a proclamation I'd like to read. Whereas the U.S. Census Bureau is required by the U.S. Constitution to conduct a count of the population and provide historic opportunity to help shape the foundation of our society and play an active role in American democracy. And whereas the census is vital to our community, and in that the data ensures fair congressional representation by determining how many seats each state will have in the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as the redistricting of state legislature, county and city councils and voting districts. And whereas accurate census information is critical to planning for future growth, development, and social needs of Sedgwick County. And whereas state and federal funding for social and other programs are made in part on census data. And whereas census information is confidential and federal law prohibits any public or private agency from gaining access to this data. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Chairman David T. Dennis, and the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners do hereby recognize Sedgwick County to be a 2020 census partner and is committed to ensuring every resident is counted. It is our privilege to partner with the U.S. Census Bureau in achieving an accurate and complete count in the census in 2020. And this is, I would like to make a motion that we approve this proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. And this is being accepted by Steve Hale from the 2020 Census Plan. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Dennis and Commissioners. Again, my name is Steve Hale. I'm a partnership specialist for the state of Kansas, and with me is Carlos Aquia Diaz. Carlos is handling the Hispanic outreach throughout the state. Is going to be working closely with Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita in that regard. And Chris Adams lives here in the Wichita area, and she'll be actively engaged. You're actually absolutely right about the proclamation and what was said about the importance of the census. The Constitution requires every 10 years that we do a count of everyone living in the United States. And one of all the reasons you mentioned, perhaps one of the biggest is the funding that will come to this area. As you noted, the census counts have a great deal of impact on how federal funds are distributed. In Kansas, in 2016, received more than $6 billion from 55 federal programs that ranged everything from highways to Meals on Wheels to Medicare to just a number of things. So we're here working with Sedgwick County to get a complete and accurate count. I want to thank Brett Shelton for the work that he's done. And also was pleased to say that yesterday we had a similar proclamation read by Mayor Longwell for the city of Wichita. And we're very pleased to report that both Wichita and Sedgwick County are collaborating on a complete count committee to work with the trusted voice in this communities to make sure that we have a complete and accurate count in 2020. Remember, the census is easy, it's safe, and it's important. And thank you for your support.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, Steve. We sincerely appreciate you being here, and we know the importance of the census. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item F, proclamation declaring Correction Officers Week.
Thank you. Commissioners, I have a proclamation to read. Whereas in 1984, then President Ronald Reagan signed Proclamation 5187, creating National Correctional Officer Week. The first full week in May has since been recognized as National Correctional Officers Week to honor the work of correctional officers and correctional personnel nationwide. And whereas the dedication of these correctional officers and detention deputies who serve our community quietly, taking on the very difficult and dangerous duties, and whereas we would be unable to operate our adult and juvenile detention facilities and community correctional programs without the hard work of these professionals that staff these facilities 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And whereas Sedgwick County is pleased to join in celebrating Correctional Officers Week, recognizing these men and women who risk their lives and serve so diligently and faithfully. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Chairman David T. Dennis, and the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners do hereby proclaim the week of May 5th to the 11th, 2019 as Correctional Officers Week in Sedgwick County, and encourage all citizens to honor and show sincere appreciation for correctional officers who make it possible to keep the detention and correctional facilities safe each day. Commissioners, I'd like to move that we approve this proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call a roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Thank you. Thanks for being here to receive the proclamation.
Yes, I'm Captain Schechter with Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office. Happy to accept this proclamation on behalf of Sheriff Easter and Colonel White, who unfortunately could not be here this early this morning. Every day, a very thankless but important job is performed by our detention deputies. They walk the hallways, housing units, and run our entire facility. They keep our community safe by keeping those people contained who harmed our community, but they also help those people who harmed our community, providing critical services to them, helping them with programming, reentry, anything they may need while in the facility. And the public may not always notice it or say, but they do perform a critical task by maintaining the safety and security. And they perform a critical function of the criminal justice system. And the criminal justice system would actually probably grind to a halt without people to run our jails and run our prisons and take care of these people in these tough situations right now. So again, thank you for recognizing the detention deputies and the fabulous job they do every day.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for representing Sheriff Easter this morning. Each of us, I know, have toured each and every one of the correctional facilities, and we know what kind of important work that you all do every day. Commissioner Howell would like to say a couple comments.
I just want to say thank you for all you do. I'm on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and I interface with the sheriff, and I know that he is very passionate about running a really great jail. As hard as that is, it's very difficult. It requires a lot of great people, and I know that you guys do a tremendous job. And I think it's a very difficult job. And I know that there's continuing to be challenges filling all of the positions. I was kind of hoping this morning you would talk about maybe a job opportunity for people who might be listening to this meeting today. If they're interested in becoming a corrections officer, are there available positions, and how do they do that?
Yeah, we have approximately at least 15 50 to 60 open positions right now. We got academy we're trying to seat right now. June 10th right now is our next academy. We're working very diligently. We have a job fair. We encourage anyone to go to the Sheriff's Office webpage. There's a link right there to join our team and apply. Starting pay for detention deputies right now is $15.96 an hour plus shift differential. It's got an outstanding benefits package through the county and a pension through the state. It's a great way to find your passions. And I started there 20 years ago now. Didn't really know what I was applying for. Wanted something different to do, and found as a passion, a career I wanted to be involved in to help my community and make my little corner of the world a better place. I think anyone who's looking for those opportunities, it's a great opportunity. They need to be 18 years old at least, have a high school diploma, and that's basically what gets you in the door to get started that application process. I encourage anyone to even call us at 660-3800 at the academy if they have any questions also, and also just go to our webpage.
I am also just, if you can describe the academy, how many weeks long is it? Is it a paid position while they're doing the training?
It's an 11-week academy and then 6 weeks of on-the-job training with a field training deputy. So we invest 17 weeks of training to have a professionally developed and professional organization. It's full paid from the very beginning, Commissioner, and the full benefits from the very beginning. So we believe in investing in our people to run a very well-run facility.
Well, thank you again for what you do. I'm extremely impressed. The professionalism is second to none, and I think you all do just a tremendous, outstanding job, so thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Once again, thanks for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Appointments. Item G, accept the resignation of Virgil Miller from the Sedgwick County Advisory Council on Aging and Physical Disabilities.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Poon, Interim County Counselor. You have before you the resignation of Mr. Miller, who is Commissioner O'Donnell's appointment to the Sedgwick County Advisory Council on Aging. Ask that you accept the resignation.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we accept the resignation of Mr. Virgil Miller, and want to publicly thank him for his years of service on that board, but his new employment does not allow him to make it to the meetings any longer. So with that, I make my motion.
Thank you. I second the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Next item, please.
Item H, accept the resignation of Paul Matzek from the position of clerk for the Sedgwick County Payne Township Board.
Commissioners, Michael Poon again, Interim County Counselor. Mr. Matzek has been serving as the Payne Township Clerk for the last 8 years. Won his election in 2018, but as you can see in your backup, because of personal reasons, doesn't believe he can continue to fulfill that job, so or that position. So we'd ask that you accept his resignation.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I make a motion to accept the resignation as well, but I want to thank Paul for his service. I did get a chance to meet him and talk with him, and yes, he did have after 8 years, he had some family and some job stuff that would not allow him to serve further. So, but he appreciated everything he's done, and the Payne Township is adjacent to the city limits. It's kind of a growing township, and so it's an important job that he performed, and I want to extend my thanks and make a motion to accept the resignation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Next item, please.
Item I, resolution appointing Marian BECK to the Sedgwick County Payne Township Clerk position.
Commissioners, Michael Poon, Interim County Counselor. By state statute, when there's a vacancy in a township position, as there is right now in Payne Township, it's the job of the county commission to appoint that replacement. Commissioner Meitzner is recommending that Marian BECK be appointed to replace Mr. Matzek as the Payne Township Clerk. So we'd ask that you have a resolution before you that's in proper form appointing Marian BECK, and ask that you approve the resolution.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner.
Thank you. Is Marian here? Yeah, there you are. Okay. We've visited on the phone and some other things we visited about. So I'm honored and glad for your willingness to serve, and I'm proud to make a motion to appoint you and adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Please step forward. Raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Kansas, and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Payne Township Clerk, so help me God.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman. Looking forward to doing a job that I have not done before, and thank you again.
You'll do a nice job, Marian.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item J, resolution reappointing Jonathan Holmes to the Sedgwick County Public Building Commission.
Commissioners, Mike Spoon, Interim County Counselor. This is Commissioner Howell's appointment to the Sedgwick County Public Building Commission. He is recommending reappointing Jonathan Holmes. We have a resolution prepared. It's in your backup in proper form, and ask that you approve the resolution.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to adopt the resolution reappointing Jonathan Holmes. I'd like to just say he's a great servant and highly qualified for this position, and appreciate his service to the county. So I made the motion we adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Thank you.
All right. Good morning again. All right. Please raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Kansas, and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Sedgwick County Public Building Commission, so help me God.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for the appointment, and I look forward to continuing to serve in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, next item.
Item K, resolution appointing Lyndon Wells to the Sedgwick County Public Building Commission for District 1.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner.
Thank you. I do not see Lindy here today, but I've known Lindy for a number of years. He does a fantastic job in a number of areas that he serves, and so I know that he's done well serving on the Public Building Commission. I'm glad that he's agreed to continue to serve. So I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Thank you. And next item, please.
New business, item L, Kansas African American Museum presentation.
Morning, Tim.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tim Kaufman, Deputy County Manager and Public Services Director. In my role, I get the opportunity to work with a number of really great cultural and arts organizations across the community, and I think it's important to highlight the service that they provide to the community. And so today, I've invited Kansas African American Museum to come present. I'd like to recognize Ted Ayers, their board chair, and then invite Denise Sherman to come do a brief presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Ms. Sherman.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair, Commissioners, Sedgwick County staff, and visitors. As stated on the agenda, I am Denise Sherman, the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Museum, and I have served in this role since August 2018. I'm really excited to share that because during this opportunity, I appreciate the opportunity to present an update to you today on the Kansas African American Museum, which we often refer to as TCAM. So on behalf of the TCAM Board of Directors, staff, supporters, volunteers, and visitors, we sincerely thank the Sedgwick County for the past, present, and future support of TCAM, as it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for us to continue without the financial support and additional services that Sedgwick County provides. Our experiences with your staff have been phenomenal, and we really treasure the relationship. So what I've discovered during the time that I've been there, that not everyone is familiar with Kansas African American Museum, or they may not have had an experience. So what I wanted to share today is that we are located in the heart of the downtown area, directly north of the Sedgwick County property at 601 North Water. And somewhat hidden, the Kansas African American Museum has, over the years, faced many challenges and have overcome many obstacles. As you can see here on this slide, we were initially started out as the Second Baptist Church of 1878 with Calvary Baptist. That building initially was deemed not up to code, and so it was torn down. And so the current building that we reside in today is the Calvary Baptist Church, which is now the Kansas African American Museum. You can see here we are on the historical registry as well. And our mission with the Kansas African American Museum is that we endeavor to make the African American experience relevant and resonate with every Kansan. And so how we do that is that we must continue to tell the story, our collective history, through the historical archives, art collections, the artifacts, the education services, and the programs, as well as raise cultural awareness. And in this role, the responsibility and the contribution of the Kansas African American Museum, we feel that we really are uniquely qualified to provide that to the community. So again, for those who have not experienced TCAM or the Kansas African American Museum, we invite you to do so. We are working diligently to expand our audience, program services, and cultural awareness for our offerings, and we want everyone to be excited to learn more. So in doing so, I do want to share that we have several core collections in our museum, and one is the Journey Through Kansas, which is the landmarks of the African American history. And this is just an example through the state of Kansas that we highlight Mr. Langston Hughes, who was raised in Lawrence, Kansas, but very significantly contributed here in Wichita as well. Another core collection is our Africa to Kansas collection, which is by Samela S. Lewis, an art historian. And if you haven't had a chance to come and look at the artifacts, the mask, and the tools and things that were used throughout the regions of Africa, it is really a must-see. We are very proud of this extensive collection and invite everyone to come by and see. Our current exhibition is the Horizontes project, and many of you are familiar with that because this is the one that was or has been the pivotal project of Mr. Armando Majares, who conceived this art project out of the questions related to the community engagement of two underrepresented neighborhoods in North Wichita, which is primarily or predominantly the Latino North End and historically the African American Northeast community. And as this question became a concept and then turned into an art project and now a tangible initiative, it has sparked many conversations throughout the public, through the public displays of art that really tell the stories of two communities of color, and it has also provided cultural awareness to the greater community. This collection will be a part of the permanent collection of the Kansas African American Museum, and if you have not had a chance to visit, we will have this on display, or the exhibition will be on display until May 25th. Again, this started out as a question, what's in your horizon? And as you can see here, it is an opportunity not only to highlight the cultural significance and contributions, but also to build dialogue, build division, and tell personal stories of those who lived in those two communities. So here in the museum are a couple of pictures here that shows of the current display, those that lived in both communities. And again, we extend an invitation for you to come by and see. The other thing that I would like to share with you is an initiative that was started at TCAM about a year or so ago through a grant that was provided by the Institute of Museums and Library Services, or IMLS. And this is our third opportunity to have such a prestigious grant. The $134,000 grant supported the project called the Kansas African American History Trail, which provides a connection across the state of Kansas by linking 8 historical significant sites that really tell the story of the African American contributions across Kansas, chronicling the people, places, and events that really created this rich history. And it is a shared history that represents this great state, and the Kansas African American Museum is one of the historical sites. And so as we are the basically the promoter and the owner of this project, we certainly are proud to provide the connectiveness that is part of this trail. And as you can see here, the other additional sites are including the Nicodemus National Historical Site, which is located in Graham County in western Kansas, Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka, as well as Freedom's Frontier in Lawrence, the Richard Allen Cultural Center in Leavenworth, and the John Brown Museum Historical Site in Osawatomie, and the Gordon Parks Museum. This past January, TCAM, we celebrated with a launch of our website for the Kansas African American Trail, which is www.tcamhistorytrail.org. And we invite you to join us in 2 upcoming trips, June and July, where we will be visiting the Fort Scott location, Gordon Parks Museum, as well as we will be taking a trip to Topeka and to Lawrence, Kansas. The next thing I want to share with you is our upcoming connections and community conversations that will be our next exhibit called Sorting Out Race. And this exhibition will examine racial identity and stereotypes, which were derived from artifacts and collectibles and basically things that were discarded through thrift shop donations. And this exhibition was started through the Kaufman Museum in Bethel, Kansas, in Newton, Kansas. And we are going to have this display in June through August. And the impetus on this display is that we are going to hold programming that will encourage conversations in the Wichita area about stereotypes and race. And so we feel that we, again, are uniquely qualified to provide this cultural experience. And one of the things that we want to share is that the insight on this project is that the conversations that can develop and provide a visual context to foster better understanding of how seemingly innocent objects can hold a deeper meaning. So this is an opportunity for not only covering stereotypes and racial issues, cultural and historical references, but also to find out for ourselves and discover more about others on how we feel about certain things. This display will start out as you enter into a community thrift store, but from there you will not only see artifacts that are not only cover African American culture, but all types of colors and people of color. So this will have a broad range, and we are excited to present this. I would be remiss if I did not share that we have our upcoming Trailblazers Gala in October, which is a major fundraiser for us, and that we are finalizing our keynote speaker, who is an Oscar-winning screenwriter, and we encourage you to join us on that evening as we highlight and acknowledge and award those who have been trailblazers in our community. Moving forward, it is critical that TCAM is poised and positioned for the future. And so our discussions at TCAM are centered around these 3 items. TCAM, we really need TCAM to be visible, accessible, and sustainable as we move into the future. It is important that we keep the dialogue going, and it's vital that the Kansas African American Museum remain a part of the cultural fabric in our community. As we referenced the Chung report, diversity inclusion is very important, and we feel again that TCAM should be a part of that in reshaping the perceptions and changing the narrative of the community. I want to conclude my comments with again our website and the hours that we are open, and that TCAM is a hidden jewel in our community. And with all of our efforts, we really want to focus on elevating the contributions that African Americans have made, not only in our city, our county, and in our state, but also how TCAM is seeding into the future. And so as we look forward to seeing TCAM thrive, again, we appreciate the support that Sedgwick County has given us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you so much for your presentation today. I just have one quick question about how much does it cost to get into your museum?
Yes, our cost is very reasonable. It is $6 for an adult, $4 for youth and seniors.
Reasonable. And there's on-street parking?
There is, but you can also park in the parking garage, and we will validate your parking ticket.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time yesterday. We and Ted and you and I met, and I just want to appreciate you right now, because I think that what you bring to the community is important for us all, and if you went away, we would have a big hole that was missing. So I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done. I feel your passion. I see the energy that you've put into this. I know you guys are working hard to be more visible. Your outreach in the community is noticed. So thank you for all you do, and I would just encourage all community members who haven't gone to go see it, because $6 to get into this place. It's not hard to find, even though it's kind of tucked back in there. But go see it. It's worth your time, and it's a very educational opportunity for children. So I would encourage everybody to check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you. As we move into the budget cycle that we're in right now, one of the things that we do is support the TCAM. I know that I saw what your goals are for the future, that the sustainable portion of it is, I think we're probably going to need some more information along that line on what your plans are for the future to sustain what you're doing and to enhance your museum, how you're going to protect the artifacts. I know that last time I was over there, you've got a ton of very valuable artwork stored underneath the front steps. So I'm interested in where we're going in the future and how that you're going to be sustainable. So I appreciate the fact that you listed that as one of your goals, but I'm interested in how we're going to accomplish that goal.
Yes, well, thank you for asking. Yes, we are definitely working on that, and we will be able to provide you with a solid plan on what our strategy is to move forward.
Okay, well, I'd like it as we're moving, because we're going to adopt a budget come up by August 7th, and you're part of our budget. So
yes,
we need to make sure that we have the information as we go through the development of that budget.
We will definitely get that to you.
Okay.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, I guess, two questions. Number one, has the hours changed recently? Is this the same hours you had?
No, this has been our hours for quite some time. Tuesday through Friday, we're open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Very good.
And then on Saturdays, noon to 4.
All right, well, thank you. And then Commissioner Cruz mentioned something about outreach into the community. Are you doing something different or new that we can talk about how the outreach is happening? Is there some different type of effort that's something new that we can talk about how the museum is getting more attention?
Yes, we are making a concerted effort for identifying partnerships that are mutually beneficial not only to us but to others in the community. And I'm proud to say that we've had quite a few opportunities where people have called us and asked us, can they meet and visit with us about projects and initiatives. And so we are working on those, and we feel that 2020 is going to be a pivotal year for us.
Very good. Well, thank you for the presentation. My last question would be, how long has the museum been an entity here in Sedgwick County? How long has it been around?
Yes. So the museum started in 1975 as the Black Historical Society, and then moved in towards the Kansas African American Museum in the 1990s.
Well, thank you for that answer. And so I agree with the chairman. The three goals of visible, accessible, and sustainable are excellent words. I think that's those ought to be conversation starters. I think that's very good to identify those as three strategic goals for keeping the museum alive and thriving in our community. But thank you for all you do, and I appreciate the presentation. I think it is a hidden jewel, and I wish it wasn't hidden. I wish it was well known, so much so that it wasn't really a hidden jewel. It should be something we really talk about and should be a forefront of our community. But I think that's one of our challenges. We need to find a way to get it more attention. But thank you for the presentation. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file a report.
Thank you. We have a motion. I'd like to second the motion. Any discussion?
Yeah, Denise, what was the group that you had in there yesterday?
The Wichita Art Museum, Murdoch Society, was there yesterday, and we have, like I said, have had a lot of visitors that we haven't had in the past who are very interested not only in what we're exhibiting but what we're moving forward with.
Great, thank you.
We're very excited about it.
Very good. I don't see any further discussion. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye. Denise, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. Next item, please.
Item M, consider request for property tax relief pursuant to K.S.A. 79-1613 in the amount of $573.19.
Morning, Justin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. Pursuant to K.S.A. 79-1613, if a homestead is destroyed or substantially destroyed as a result of a flood, fire, earthquake, tornado, storm, or other event declared a disaster by the governor, the owner of the homestead may apply for a tax abatement or credit. The particular application you have in front of you today is for a residence that was located at 3105 South Hillside in Wichita, which is in District 5. Fire occurred there on May 18th of 2018 and resulted in a total loss to the property, which was a single-family home. The owners of record of that property are Danny and Renee Park. Mr. Park submitted their application for property tax relief in the county clerk's office. It's worth noting that this property was rented by the Parks to tenants who lived in the property at the time of the fire, and the Parks did not live in the property at that time. With regard to I'll present a summary of the three findings that you as the Board of County Commissioners are required to make under the statute, and also some staff comments and recommendations on those. I will note the overarching recommendation from staff on this is a neutral recommendation for you to take the action that you deem appropriate in this case. So the first finding is whether or not this was a homestead. Consistent with the neutral recommendation I just mentioned, county staff does not have a recommendation as to whether you should find that this is a homestead or not. You do have to make a finding, but we don't have a recommendation on one side or the other on that at this point in time. I will note the definition of homestead within that statute could lead itself to multiple reasonable interpretations, one of which could be that a rented out dwelling could qualify as a homestead, whereas another reasonable interpretation would be that it would not qualify as a homestead. I'm going to give you some reasons that I think each of those could be reasonable conclusions. I'd be happy to answer any questions following that up if you have them. Support for a finding that this could qualify as a homestead is that within the statute, homestead is defined as being owned or rented. That's part of the definition, so it does seem to contemplate that a rented structure could qualify as a homestead. Also, the phrase occupied as a residence by the household is included. This particular structure was occupied. The term household is not defined in the statute. And household, if you look at its common definition, you look in the dictionary, it means a group of people living in a dwelling. It doesn't necessarily tie it to ownership. On the other side of that, the other conclusion, this could not qualify as a homestead. First, the definition of homestead in Kansas, for example, if you're applying it to exemption laws, if somebody wanted to keep their home in a bankruptcy, or if they had medical debt or credit card debt, that requires the person actually live in the property, and you can only have one homestead. You can't have more than one. So that would be one of the reasons. There's a couple more that I think would support that. One of which would be that the legislative intent when this was adopted, and I know that two of the commissioners were members of the legislature when this occurred, would not have supported this applying to a rented property. I think you'll hear that view some today. Also, within the definition, I mentioned on the other argument it says rented. It does talk about a portion of the dwelling. So perhaps the reason that rented was included, again, it's hard to suss that out, but perhaps the reason that was included was so that if somebody lived in half of a duplex or half of a home, that only the portion they lived in could be considered a homestead and qualify for tax relief, and the other portion would not. So you, as county commissioners, are tasked with making findings on that ultimately. The other two findings, first is whether the homestead was destroyed or substantially destroyed. County staff recommends a finding that this homestead was destroyed, as the appraiser's office determined this was a total loss. Then lastly, there's a finding on the assessed valuation of the property, and for the applicable tax year, in this case, the assessed valuation was $5,279. There's a few other items I was going to mention is that even if a property does meet all the requirements of qualifying for relief, under the statute, the Board of County Commissioners has discretion not to approve that relief. Also, there's no public hearing required by statute on this, but I would suggest that you allow the property owner, their agent, or any other interested parties to make any statements during this agenda item. And in this case, the agenda backup materials, consistent with the neutral recommendation, has two orders, one to approve the tax relief and one to deny it. I would note that on the approval, if you would vote to do that, the order in that case has, excuse me, has language in there. The property owners have asked if the relief is granted that it would apply to the credit would apply to another property they own, which is allowed by the statute. You can take action on this by a simple majority vote, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Justin? Before I go any further, I normally recognize any elected representatives, and Representative Del Dang just entered the room. We want to welcome him today. Thank you very much for being here. Do we have any questions of Justin? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the presentation was very well done. Thank you for that. But I do have some comments and probably a motion. But I would like to hear if there's anybody in the audience that has any comments before I go any further. Thank you.
Yeah, I will ask that. Commissioner Meitzner.
Yeah, Justin, listening to your, it sounds like there's the word homestead is that kind of the focus of the definition of homestead as it relates to this?
Yes, it very much is the crux of the issue on this particular property. And this, it's not unique to this property, I guess I would add. We've had that come up before.
Is a policy or a statute that, so under the terms of this application, a homestead can be rented property under. Is that correct? I mean,
I think a homestead could be. I think the answer is that that's a reasonable interpretation would be that it could be a rented property. That's not to say that I think that the opposite conclusion is unreasonable. Right. And I know that's a lawyerly answer down the middle, but that's. I think to the answer to your question, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. Thanks for confusing me. But let's say you made reference, which was kind of noteworthy. So in a bankruptcy proceedings or in other legal proceedings, homestead is your place where you reside, your residence.
That's correct. Usually the term household or other language will indicate that the property owner has to actually live there.
Correct.
This statute doesn't say that explicitly. Right. You would have to infer that into the statute if you were to make that determination.
So in this application, a person could own 12 rental homes and claim each one of them as a homestead if they had an accident or a fire on that.
I think
all 12
yes.
of them. So, okay, well that helps me try to determine what, and I would hope that maybe, I think we've talked before, maybe we come up with a little bit of a policy that helps us define that so it's clear to the citizens and commissioners today and in the future. But, okay,
good.
Thank you for answering that.
I don't see any other questions from commissioners. At this time, I'd like to see if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this issue. Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the bench. Commissioner Howell, did you have some other questions?
Well, just it's just a couple of comments again. So K.S.A. 79-1613 was the result of a couple of years worth of effort based on the Oaklawn tornado. The intent was that we have a community that's substantially wiped out, and there's a lot of suffering in a community. Typically, when you have a single home that's has a flood or a fire, something like that, it's a single dwelling, usually the community has plenty of resources to come alongside and help them out. But when you have a community-wide disaster, it's much different. Greensburg is a good example. And Oaklawn had significant suffering and damage as a result of that tornado that happened in 2012. And so we worked to give the county an option. It didn't say again, the word is may in the statute, KSA 79-1613 provides discretion to the county to, if they choose to, provide some relief, trying to help people get back on their feet. It really is the intent that there's tremendous suffering by people, and we're just trying to help them out. This is not considered to be an entitlement. We don't want someone who suffered loss to be harmed in any way, but really this is talking about the humanitarian type of relief, trying to help someone who's really out of options and they're just trying to get back on their feet. That was the intent of this law, but it was amended in 2014, and they expanded this to this type of application. And I think the law is woefully inadequate in terms of its definitions, and I think that this is not what the intent was of this law. I think the original intent was fine, but where it's at right now, I think is not what was intended. And I think that the legislature ought to revisit this. Maybe this should be on our legislative platform. But we have discretion here to write a policy, and I think that's what we're lacking here. We need to, I've mentioned this, I think this is the third time now I've said that we need to have a local policy that would apply some consistency on how we manage these. But in my opinion, the word homestead here is a key word, and I don't think this is what was intended by this. It's just as a rental property. This is not, to the owners, this is not a humanitarian issue. This is more of a tax relief. And I don't know if they have insurance on this property. I don't know if you have that information or not.
I'm not certain of the answer to that, Commissioner Howell. Yeah, and when county staff asked,
maybe that's not our business, perhaps, but I would assume anybody who owns a home typically would have home insurance on that property, and that would be the first relief. There is a risk in owning property. Things happen sometimes, and responsible adults manage these issues as they come. But I think this allows us discretion and permission to abate if we feel like it's necessary. And this is a case where I don't think it is. I think this is well outside what was intended when we passed that law in 2013. So I would like to, number one, I'd like to make a comment that I think we need to develop this policy. Please, let's do that. Let's make this important, and this, because these are going to just keep coming at us. We've got more coming, I'm sure. I think it's not fair to the applicants for us to have this discussion each time this comes before this board. But with all that in mind, I'd like to make a motion that we would deny the property tax relief. I move that we approve the order denying property tax relief. Authorize the chairman to sign it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second.
And I want to explain why. And I have to agree with both Commissioner Howell and Commissioner Meitzner. I think the amount of time that has been spent, staff time, the time that it took to brief all of us commissioners, I think we just need to kind of set a policy that says what we're going to do with this, because I know that every time you come in, Justin, as much as I like to see you, if we can do something that we can focus our energy in other places, I think that that's what we should do.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Aye.
Chairman Dennis?
Aye.
thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Justin. Next item, please.
Item N, consideration of a National Institute of Justice Fiscal Year 2019 DNA Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program Grant in the amount of $290,000 for the new DNA Laboratory Information Management System.
Morning, Doctor.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman and Board, for allowing me to come before you and explain a little bit about this program and the proposal that the Regional Forensic Science Center would like to put forth. The U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Justice Programs, and the National Institute of Justice solicited for the 2019 DNA Capacity Enhancement for Backlog Reduction Program, and that program funds state and local laboratories that conduct DNA analysis, essentially crime labs, to increase the capacity to process more DNA samples. And by doing so, that results in fewer samples pending analysis. It ultimately reduces the backlog of DNA samples that exist for casework and databasing laboratories across the United States. And I want to begin by pointing out that this grant has no match requirement. Accordingly, the Sedgwick County Regional Forensic Science Center wishes to offer a proposal for grant funding, and I'm going to take a moment to toot my horn. In 2016, I was given the responsibility of making application and managing these grants. And if we are successful with this award, we will have secured $946,331, or nearly $1 million of technology and resources for Sedgwick County. That said, I'd also like to provide a success story. We, in recent years, were able to acquire a new genetic analyzer and chemistry to validate a system that allowed us to interrogate more regions of the DNA, which gives us more information about that person and their profile. And it makes the profile more discriminating. So if anyone ever told you you were 1 in a million, I'm here to tell you you're probably more like 1 in a quintillion, or maybe even more special than that. That said, that also allowed our continued participation in the DNA database and the FBI's expansion of the number of loci that they search for criminal purposes. And as you well know, that database routinely provides investigative leads and solves crimes that would otherwise go unsolved. That said, this grant is structured such that there is a certain amount of money that's allocated to the state of Kansas, and within that state, the entities eligible need to figure out how we're going to divide that up. We generally give consideration to the number of Part 1 crimes, property crimes, and the population for the various regions that each lab serves. I was successful in negotiating $290,000, or the greater portion of the money that's available. That portion was close to $794,000. And there's something new in the solicitation this year that I think is very special and important for you to understand. This year it allows for the acquisition of laboratory information management systems, or LIMS. This is previously not an approved purchase with this money. And I think the reason why is because you can't just put a LIMS in for DNA labs. When we have a homicide case in Sedgwick County, the body comes to our building for an autopsy. Samples are collected from that for toxicology. Blood is collected as a standard to be compared to the DNA evidence at the crime scene. And a projectile may be collected from the body for firearms analysis. So it'd do little good for evidence tracking if we had a system that only pertained to DNA. Our option up until now was simply to come with a decision package, and a $290,000 decision package certainly is unsavory. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to seize this opportunity, because it hasn't been one that's historically or routinely offered to us in the past, and we don't know if it will ever be an opportunity that we'll have in the future. And I also want to say that I wasn't able to get that amount of money from the KBI and the Johnson County Crime Lab to agree upon because I'm more popular than anybody else in the state, but it just is because that they really recognize that these systems are absolutely critical for a modern forensic science facility. So at this time, I just want to explain a little bit to you about what those systems do. They're really a business application that assists us in automating everything from evidence submission to report distribution. For example, if a piece of evidence comes in, it'll get a barcode, and that barcode will be used to facilitate scanned transfers to track who has that piece of evidence at any time throughout its analysis. It's called the chain of custody. That would all be digital. We're currently signing a 3-page carbon paper that is filed with the case. The system would have configurations or modules for each of the various forensic science disciplines, such as drug identification or fire debris. And all of those worksheets would then be accumulated into what would be a digital case file. We could collect data from our instrumentation that would flow directly into those case files, and the data could also be transferred into report templates to assist us in quickly generating reports and also creating a great deal of consistency between reports. We spend a lot of time analyzing evidence at the Regional Forensic Science Center, and we also spend a lot of time dealing with quality assurance and quality control to be sure that the results we provide are true and accurate. And that's another big aspect of what these management systems do. They help with tracking instrument maintenance, inventory, expiration of chemicals and reagents, even continuing education and court testimony. When we receive discovery requests, we're asked for case files and standard operating procedures that were in place during the analysis of that case. And rather than standing at the Biz Hub and scanning paper files into PDFs, we would be able to mine that information far more rapidly with the laboratory information management system. So today's commercial off-the-shelf programs and systems do serve to improve the efficiencies in virtually every service that our center provides. And from the perspective of DNA, I have to tell you that if we are ever going to truly realize the benefits of large-scale automation or robotics, this is a first and much-needed step. This is a substantial project, and we are already working with IT up front so that we're sure we get proper placement on the TRB project list. And we have a project manager designated and a security administrator, and we've had them over already to participate in some demonstrations with vendors. So that's a general overview of the program and our proposal. And I provided some specific bottlenecks in the budget narrative that was provided to you already. Not going to go through each of those, but I would be delighted to do my best in answering any questions you have.
Thank you, Doctor. And one other thing is we continue to recognize our elected officials. Recognize that Dr. Stedman is also the mayor of Mulvane.
Thank you. It's an honor to serve always, and some days it's more challenging than others. Giving the rain last night, it's one of those challenging days.
Thank you. Thanks for your service there and for our DNA. Actually, I think that all the commissioners are very pleased that you have come up with this grant and the benefits that are going to be derived from that. I don't see any questions, actually.
Comment.
We have a comment from Commissioner Howell.
Well, just want to say, number one, thank you for all you do for the city of Mulvane. Your service as well is duly noted, and it's a great community, and it's in my district, and I love the city of Mulvane, so thank you for that. But in regards to your stellar performance there at the Forensics Science Center, you do a tremendous job there as well, and I'll say thank you for bringing this grant opportunity to us. I think it's obviously well needed. We'll definitely use it. I wanted to commend whoever the grant writer is that filled out all these papers and filled out the report in the back. It's tremendously well done. I think it's obvious we need to go for this, and so I would like to make without reading the recommended action, it's very long. I'll just simply say I make a motion we take the recommended action this morning.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I don't see any further discussion. You explained it very well. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate what you're doing for us.
Thank you very much.
Next item, please.
Item O, set the public hearing for the proposed adoption of the amended version of the Domestic Water Well Code of Sedgwick County.
Morning, Chris.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Yes, this is simply to set the public hearing. We're requesting a June 19th date for this. Current version of the Domestic Water Well Code is 2006. This will bring us, obviously, to 2018. This governs residential wells in the unincorporated area. It's been through 2 versions of KDHE review. Excuse me. All commissioners have seen it at least once. Several of you have seen it a few times. The majority of the updates are administrative, placing MABCD versus code enforcement as the administrating agency, and then also changing some references based on KDHE changes to statute. We did, based on previous requests some years ago, we did evaluate a few areas where we had prohibitions on certain usages in the code. We have removed a few of those so that we will not be prohibiting some uses. We will just be regulating those, requiring that they would have the same tests and treatable water as all other uses. So again, with that, in order to meet publication requirements of KDHE, we request that the public hearing be set for June 19th.
Thank you. And the request that we're going to approve today is just set a public hearing. It's not to approve anything at this point in time.
Correct.
Very good. Well, I don't see any comments whatsoever, and I think we need to set a public hearing, so I move that we set public hearing, the date, and publish the notice of the hearing 3 times in the official county newspaper.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item P, set the public hearing for the proposed adoption of the International Building Code 2018 edition with amendments.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good morning again. Chris Labrum, MABCD. This is the 2018 International Building Codes. This is our commercial building code, the biggest one that we manage, bringing us from 2012 to 2018. We like a lot of the applications and technology updates that we see in this code. We think it'll be very beneficial to our industry. That does result in tightening some of our criteria for in-process inspections. Those are the ones that the contractor and engineers do while the construction takes place, and then those are audited by us. We don't actually do those inspections. But we've had great stakeholder involvement with this. In addition to WABA and our Code of Standards, Board of Code Standards and Appeals Review, we also had 70 representatives from general contractors, architects, engineers, and developers firms attend a review session and to go over all of our proposed amendments. So we did make some tweaks based on that. We've also, of course, been through this with both Sedgwick County and Wichita Fire Department. We're also recommending and requesting that we set a public hearing for June 19th on this code.
Thank you. I don't see any questions or comments on this. Once again, this is just to set the public hearing. So I make a motion that we set the public hearing and direct county clerk to publish notice.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item Q, set the public hearing for the proposed adoption of the International Existing Building Code 2018 edition with amendments.
Commissioners, again, Chris Labrum, MABCD for the record. This code nests with the 2018 IBC, obviously for buildings that are already in existence, mainly pertains to remodel, renovation, and repair of high-rise type structures. We obviously see several of the same advantages as we do with the new IBC. We do see that there is very little change to our standing amendment package based on this code and updates. So also recommending that we set the public hearing for adoption of this and associated amendments on June 19th.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question. Before I do that, I'll make a motion. We would set the public hearing and direct the county clerk to publish the notice of hearing. My one question would be this, is this one in the previous agenda item talks about code with amendments. The first one didn't have any amendments in the title. I think all three of these do have amendments.
Correct.
Okay, so I want to make sure that's clear. And the second of all, the last two of these require publication one time, and the first one requires publication 3 times.
That's a KDHE requirement.
It's okay. So I just wanted to make sure there was some reason why that was the case. But so again, I make a motion to do the recommended action. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion. I'll second the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Thank you, Chris. We'll be ready for the different public hearings. At this time, we're going to hear the comprehensive plan. It's going to take a little bit, so we may want to take a little short break. Let's resume at 10:35.
Okay.
Back to order. And next item, please, Madam Clerk.
Item R, presentation of the 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
All right, Rick, I knew how exciting this was going to be, so I wanted to make sure we were all fresh and ready.
Commissioner, you stole my thunder a little bit because I was going to tell you all that you probably need to go get another cup of coffee or whatever, but I appreciate that. Before I get into the report itself, I'm going to ask John Cotrera, who's director with BKD, our auditors, to come up and discuss the audit itself. So I'm going to have him come up. John.
Welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. As Rick mentioned, I'm here this morning to discuss the results of the 2018 audit and address any questions that you might have on the audit deliverables that I'll be going over this morning. So this is BKD's third year performing the audit for the county. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve the county. I think you'll see as I go through my presentation this morning that it was a very smooth and efficient audit in the current year. I know Rick had mentioned he has a rather detailed presentation that Hope and himself will be going through, so I won't get too much into the detail on the financial results, but again, just want to give you a general overview of our audit and the results of our audit. So as part of our audit process, we provide the county with three main deliverables, the first of which is our opinion on the county's CAFR. The second of which is our required communication with those charged with governance, which is obviously the county board in this case. And the third is our single audit report, which I'll also be discussing, and that's required because the county expends more than $750,000 in federal awards in the current year. So the first report I'd like to discuss is the CAFR. It's the largest of the reports. Hopefully, I believe you've all been provided the reports and had the opportunity to review them ahead of time. So the CAFR is produced internally by the county's finance department. The CAFR is the responsibility of the county. BKD's responsibility as it relates to this CAFR is to provide our opinion on whether the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So you'll see there's some dividers in the CAFR, and if you'll turn to the financial section, the first page after the financial section you'll see is on BKD letterhead. So again, this is our part of the CAFR. This is our opinion on the financial statements. Happy to report that in the current year, the county, we issued a clean opinion on the county's financial statements, so an unmodified opinion. This is the same type of opinion that was provided in the prior year. I will point out, though, if you were to compare this year's opinion with the prior year opinion, you will note that there is an emphasis of matter paragraph under our opinion paragraph. And that emphasis of matter paragraph was added in regards to GASB statement number 75. So GASB statement number 75 is a very significant standard for all governments, the county included, and it relates to the implementation to get the net OPEB liability on the books for the retiree health insurance that the county offers to its retirees. Post-employment health benefits. So since it was a significant standard that was implemented in the current year, we just called that matter to the attention of the reader in that emphasis of matter paragraph. So just directly after our audit opinion is the management's discussion and analysis. So I know this is a very lengthy document, and if you haven't had the opportunity to read through the entire document, I would certainly encourage you to at least read through management's discussion and analysis. So the MD&A is just meant to provide a high-level executive-type summary of the current year activity. Pretty clear, concise summary. This is written by management, and again, gives you pretty good context as to when looking at the numbers and going through the entire CAFR. It's definitely use the MD&A as a good starting point when you're reviewing the CAFR. With that, if I could just bring your attention to page A70 of the CAFR, so note 4H. This is the restatement footnote related to that GASB Statement 75 implementation that I had mentioned. And again, just want to point out here that this shows the restatement to beginning net position as a result of that implementation. And actually, when you look at this, the county actually gained net position with the implementation of the new accounting standard. And that's because the liability that was measured under GASB 45, the previous standard as it related to post-employment health benefits, that retiree health insurance, that was actually larger than the total OPEB liability that was measured under GASB 75. So there was a slight pickup of net position as it related to that implementation. Page A75 in the CAFR. So this is supplemental information that's required by GASB. And this is a new schedule this year, and this is going to summarize that total OPEB liability. And it really walks you through the changes in that total OPEB liability for the current year. So the current year change is pretty insignificant, about $94,000. But I did want to just point your attention to the fact that right now the county is reporting a total OPEB liability. It's not reporting a net OPEB liability. The reason being is, as the first sentence below this table indicates, there's no assets accumulated formally in a trust as it relates to this liability. So there's nothing formally set aside to fund this future obligation. Also want to point out that similar to the pension required supplemental information, this schedule will build up to 10 years, so it'll be nice to see how your liability has been trending year over year. With that, I just want to draw your attention to the single audit tab. It's the last tab of the CAFR. And as I had mentioned, the county is required to have this single audit performed because there were more than $750,000 in expenditures in the current year. So this audit is performed in accordance with government auditing standards and federal uniform guidance. So the uniform guidance requires that we identify and test what are referred to as major programs. And this is driven primarily by dollar amounts, but also by risk within the program. So in the current year, we actually audited 4 major programs, which were the Aging Program, WIC, a Department of Transportation formula grant, and a Missing Children's Assistance grant. Our opinion on compliance with the requirements of these programs is also an unmodified or clean opinion, so no issues from that perspective. Similar to our CAFR opinion, no modifications. With that, I want to turn your attention to the other deliverable that we provided in the current year, which is our required communication with the county board, commonly referred to as our SAS 114 letter. So this communication is required by auditing standards and is really just intended to give you an overview of how the audit process went and make sure that the county board understands its responsibility in overseeing the financial reporting process for the county. So starting down at the bottom of the first page here, we make reference to the significant accounting policies, which are identified in Note 1 of your CAFR. And you'll also see there again a reference to the GASB 75 restatement footnote, which I discussed a moment ago. So we had no issues or concerns with alternative accounting treatments in the current year. Part of the financial reporting process requires management to determine estimates for certain items that are reported in the financial statements. So significant estimates required in the current year were made around the fair value of investments, pension and OPEB liabilities, and the depreciable lives of capital assets. We have no concerns with those, no biases noted. Significant financial statement disclosures that we would just wanted to point your attention to in that CAFR document related to investments, net pension liabilities, that OPEB liability, and the tax abatements disclosure. As part of our audit process, we did identify a few journal entries that were recorded and posted. We also identified some journal entries that were deemed to be immaterial to the financial statements, and as a result, they were not recorded, but they were attached to that letter. So we have no concerns around the county's application of accounting principles. We had no disagreements with management in the current year. As I mentioned, the audit went really smooth this year. You have a very professional and knowledgeable finance department, and they were ready for us day one when we came into audit at the end of January, and were very responsive to our request throughout the entire audit process right when we issued the report in the middle of April. Now, the second part of the letter relates to internal control procedures, which I believe this has already been communicated, so I wasn't planning on getting into the details on that. And then the next part of the letter just discusses other matters, which primarily consist of upcoming GASB pronouncements. So GASB continues to be very busy and is rapidly pumping out new requirements. We're up to GASB 90 now, so maybe we're going to have a GASB 100 party when we get there. So we'll point out just GASB 84 and GASB 87 are probably the two most significant ones for the county. We've had discussions with the county on both of those and have no concerns with their ability to implement them timely and efficiently. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions that anybody might have on any of the audit deliverables.
Well, thank you very much. Right now I don't see any questions, but what we truly appreciate is an outside independent audit of our finances and how that we're doing. And I am glad that you agree with us that we have a very professional finance department that has tremendous leadership, and each and every individual in there is doing a tremendous job. So I thank you very much for confirming what we feel all along.
Great.
Any questions from the Commission? Seeing none, thank you for being here. I know we briefed you briefed us here last week, and we appreciate that too.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners, now we'll get into the meat of the CAFR. And
Okay,
I know that
I said good things about you, so.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Noted. I'm going to go back and replay that too. As stated, the reason why we produce a CAFR obviously is that we are required to produce a CAFR or complete a fiscal year wrap-up within 180 days at the end of the fiscal year. And that's required by not only by state law but by bond covenants. And because we bond money, then we have to report on our finances every year. The financial statements are, again, required to be audited. You got that audit report from BKD. So what we have is, well, before I go further, let me do this. And this has kind of already been done by you. But the financial report itself, but more importantly, the day-to-day accounting work is done by a team of professionals. I stand up here and I present the data to you, but the hard work is done by the accounting team, and represented here is Hope Hernandez, accounting director, Marty Hughes, our revenue manager, Brandy Bailey, principal accountant. Who am I missing? Melissa Slaughter also works in revenue, Mandy Estes, and Amy Walters. So that's the team who does the hard work day after day to make sure that we get a clean opinion from BKD. So I just want to make sure that we recognize them. And Hope is going to come up here and actually talk about the entity-wide statement in a minute so you can get the accounting perspective of this report. So again, the challenge that we have, the primary goal of a private sector is obviously to make a profit. Well, that's not our goal here as a government. We have economic goals, but our primary purpose is to provide services that can't be provided maybe by to private citizens. So on that, we have three perspectives when we look at the analysis of our financial statements. One is near-term financing, and that's done in the traditional fund statements. And I'm going to brief those to you. Then we have a financial position, and those are the entity-wide financial statements. And that's what I'm going to ask Hope to come up here and brief those to you. And then we look at long-term trends or the statistics that actually, a lot of people find very interesting. And there's a statistics tab in the CAFR that gives a lot of good information. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to wrap up with those things. So again, let me reiterate, we have two ways of looking at our things. We have a modified accrual basis of accounting, and those are our traditional fund statements. And then we have a full accrual accounting, which is our entity-wide statements. And if you have questions on that, Hope is probably prepared to address what the difference is between modified accrual and full accrual accounting. Okay, no questions, see? So we begin with the traditional fund statements. So where I begin is fund balances. So I begin with the end, if you will. So we're going to talk about each of those fund balances. And fund balance is the amount of net assets that we have on hand within our accumulated governmental funds at the end of the year. And this chart shows 5 years of history, so you get a sense of of how those balances have changed over the past 5 years. So if we begin at the bottom, that's our general fund. So you can see our general fund ended 2018 with a fund balance of $66.9 million. And that's remained fairly constant over a 5-year period. And as we move up the chart, the next color, that blue, those are our federal and state assistance or our grant funds. And that had an ending fund balance of $23 million. Then the gray segment above that shows that $46 million number, that's an aggregate of many programs, and let me enumerate those for you, what goes into that fund balance of those. That's the fund balances of the fire district, special revenue funds, which are included in WSU, ComCare, EMS, aging, the highway fund, noxious weeds, solid waste, special parks and rec, emergency telephone, and court trustee. Also included are capital project funds, and that's the building and equipment, street and bridge, and the road and bridge sales tax fund. So that all rolled those together. The ending fund balance in that was $46 million. Then as we move up, the next two sections, that thin blue line, that $2.6 million, and that gold color, that $7.2 million, those are our debt service and debt proceeds funds. And then at the very top, the $1.4 million is the PBC fund, and that had an ending fund balance of $1.4 million. And that's primarily the money that's collected by PBC to pay for a building on the Innovation Campus at Wichita State. So now I want to look at just the general fund. So we'll dive into that. And what this chart shows is, again, is 5 years of history. So and each of the years is divided into colors, so it segregates how our fund balance is comprised. So at the bottom, that red is identified as non-spendable fund balance. And that's fund balance that is in the form of inventories and receivables. So those are non-liquid assets, if we want to use that term. Then we move up to the gray bar, and that's assigned fund balance. Well, as we adopt a budget, and we're going to get into doing that very shortly here, when we adopt a budget every year, there's a large amount of contingencies that we adopt in case something had happened, whether it be a large storm or a major crisis that we would have to do. So we budget for those so we don't have to come back and adopt more budget authority. Of course, we don't ever expect to use that contingency money, so we don't anticipate the storm or the major crisis, but we have that in there. So when we do that, we assign that fund balance. So that is considered assigned fund balance. So we move up to the green segment, that 42.5. That's the general fund balance, which there's no designated use. So we take the sum of the unassigned fund balance and the assigned fund balance, and at the end equals what in accounting terms is called unrestricted fund balance. An unrestricted fund balance is important because we have in the county a fund balance policy that states that that unrestricted fund balance should never be less than 20% of budgeted expenditures and transfers in the general fund. So what this chart demonstrates is our compliance with that limitation. So as you run down the right side of that, our unrestricted fund balance was $55.5 million, and the budgeted expenditures and transfers were $209.2 million, and 20% of that would be $41.8 million. So our unrestricted fund balance as a percentage is 26.6%. So you can see we're above that 20% threshold. So our unrestricted fund balance in excess of that policy minimum is $13.7 million. So now I'm going to dig in a little bit, and we're going to look at some of the indicators that these fund statements show us. So one of the key questions that we want to answer has to do with budgetary solvency. And I want to make sure that you understand budgetary versus operating, and we're talking about a budget, so budgetary solvency. So that question is, are the county's annual revenues sufficient to pay for our annual budget? So what we do is we take total fund revenues and we divide that by governmental fund expenditures. So let me take a pause here as we go through these slides. Each of these slides has a page number at the top. If you look, there's parentheses. So you can reference what page on the CAFR this data is. So if you want to follow along later, you can look at your CAFR when you're bored and you just have nothing else to do. So on page A23 is where these numbers come from. And then the math is explained at the bottom of the chart. So it's total government fund revenues divided by government fund expenditures. So what we would ideally want to see on this chart is we want to be at or slightly above the 100% line. But you can see that we're consistently below that line, and in 2018 we end that at 91%. But again, we're measuring budgetary solvency. So let's move now and let's look at operating solvency. Okay, so this is to get a more reasonable picture of whether or not we're able to pay for our operations. We use this indicator, which takes the same revenue base and it compares the governmental fund expenditures, but we take out PBC, debt service, and debt proceeds funds. So the measure of operating solvency as opposed to budgetary solvency measure, again, we want to see that line at or above 100%. And you can see we're at 107.6%. So when we do the operating solvency, you see we're solvent. So another question we want to talk about or ask has to do with the flexibility of our finances. And that's to what extent do we have full control over the use of our resources? And in order to answer that question, we look at total debt service. And that's the total principal and interest on long-term debt. And we divide that by total government fund expenditures. And that's so obviously our debt takes priority over other expenditures because we have a contractual obligation to pay our debts. So at the end of 2018, our debt service expenditures amounted to 4.7% of all government fund expenditures. And you can see on that chart, you know, there's a spike above 8%. And that's because we were doing some refundings to pay off bonds prematurely. That's why you see that spike up to above 8%. So the next question we talk about is liquidity. Nat wants to know is, does the county have any difficulty paying its short-term obligations? And that's a measure of liquidity. This looks at total cash and investments that the county has on hand at the end of each year as a percentage of liabilities that the county had at the end of the year. So what it shows is our cash on hand amounted to $7.57 of every $1 of a liability. So that's a pretty good situation to be in as far as liquidity. So every $1 of a bill, we got $7 to pay it. So let me draw attention back maybe to the previous one. You see our liquidity was like at $17. And that's when the special sales tax was imposed to build the arena. So we were collecting revenue through the end of 2007. So a little in excess of $200 million in revenue was collected. We put that in the bank. And then in 2007, we began building the arena. So that's why you see that elevated liquidity measure there. Okay. I believe this is my final measure, and that is how much do we rely on other governments to fund our activities? So what is total intergovernmental revenue as a percentage of total revenue? And what we've seen over the past 10 years, and that's consistently between about 14 and 16%. But what this chart shows is we're not heavily reliant on intergovernmental revenue to pay for our operations, and it shows further that number is constant over the past 10 years. So what I'm going to do now is, I told you we're going to tag team this, and I'm going to pass this off to Hope, and she's going to talk about entity-wide financial statements.
Good morning, Commissioners. Hope Hernandez, Director of Accounting. As Rick stated earlier, I'm going to discuss the entity-wide financial statements with you. The entity-wide statements are statements that wrap all of the county's financial activity up into a single set of statements on a full accrual basis, similar to what a private business would do. I begin with the county's net position, or the county's net worth. The county had a net position at the end of 2018 of $482 million, identified by the series of bars on the left-hand side of this chart. Each bar represents a separate year, 2018 ending net position of $482 million was a lot less than the level of 2014 when our net position was $620.3 million. In 2014, our unrestricted net position was $85.2 million. Beginning in 2015, the county's unrestricted net position is a negative $29.6 million. That is a swing of about $115 million. And that is due to a new accounting rule from the Government Accounting Standards Board, also known as GASB, that took place for the first time in 2015, which required us to reflect on the county's financial statements our share of the unfunded liability of the state's CAFR's pension system. In the case of Sedgwick County, that unfunded liability amounts to about $122 million and is reflected on our financial statements for the first time in 2015. Within each bar, you can see the composition of our net position. The green segment identifies capital assets, net of any debt that is outstanding that was used to pay for those assets. The 2018 total is $467.8 million. The blue segment represents restricted net position, and the nature of the restrictions is illustrated in the pie chart on the right. There are 8 identified restricted funds listed. The county's total restricted net position at the end of 2018 was $37.7 million, which is $39 million less than the previous year. The significant reduction in the restricted funds is due to the refunding of the 2008 PBC bonds for approximately $26 million. Finally, the light blue segment represents unrestricted net position, and that's where the change has taken place, as described earlier, for the entry on our financial statements for the unfunded liability on the state's pension system. What this chart shows is what we want to know with financial position. Perhaps one of our most important questions is, did it improve or did it deteriorate? What this chart shows is that our financial position deteriorated by just over 1%. This next chart gives a little bit more details on why that is. Our beginning net position was around $500 million, and our ending net position was $491 million. During the course of the year, the real financial activity of Sedgwick County was relatively flat. However, our financial position deteriorated because our expenses exceeded our revenues by about $13.7 million. One of the things that we're always concerned with is the extent to which the various activities of the county are able to support themselves with self-generated revenues. The county is not in a profit-making business, as was stated earlier, and so we don't expect the governmental activities to be fully self-supporting, but to the extent that they can generate their own revenues means that less tax support has to be provided in order to pay for those activities. So what this chart shows are the various activities of the government, the functions of government represented by a bar, and within that bar, the total is the amount of expense that was incurred for the year. And the green is the amount of program revenue or self-generated revenue that the activity produced to pay its bills. And the blue is the amount of general revenue or tax support that was necessary in order to pay the bills for that activity. The chart shows that the largest single activity of Sedgwick County in terms of expense is public safety. During 2018, we spent just over $155 million on public safety activities. Public safety was able to produce about $38 million of program revenue through municipal jail fees and various grants to cover those bills, but the balance of around $117 million was required to be provided by taxes levied on Sedgwick County residents. So 76% of public safety activities were funded by taxes. You can also see that for each functions of government in the chart, the extent to which they were self-supporting. General government and health and welfare activities both incurred about $55 million in expenses. However, general government required about 55% tax support, while health and welfare activities, ComCare, the health department, CDDO, and aging services only required about 19% tax support. Of that $55 million, $44 million was paid for with program income generated by those activities, fees that are imposed on clients of the Human Services Department, and grant revenues that are collected to provide services to those clients. There are different measures that can be looked at to determine the adequacy of financial position of the entity-wide statements. What I'm going to focus on here is a solvency measure, which looks at the county's ability to pay off its long-term debt with its assets. So what we're doing is taking long-term liabilities as a percentage of assets, and what we see is that at 2018, we ended the year with long-term liabilities equal to about 32% of assets. So in other words, 32 cents of every liability was covered by $1 of assets. The county is in very good condition to pay off our long-term debt. Now you do see a spike in that measure over the past 2 years. The 2014 increase from what traditionally had been around the 20% threshold increased to 25 or 26% due to some debt refinancing that we were undertaking. The 2015 spike up to around the 35% threshold is due to the CAPR's liability that we must reflect on our books that we discussed earlier. But even with that liability, what this chart shows is that we have ample ability in order to repay our debts. The last tab in the CAFR is the statistics section. This section contains an awful lot of good information for anybody who might be interested in evaluating Sedgwick County finances. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time showing some of the indicators and some of the trends that can be identified by looking at those statistics. First, what we'll want to look at is the 10-year history of governmental revenues and expenses. On this chart, the green line represents revenue. The blue line represents expense. What we would hope to see is that the green line is above the blue line. However, in 2018, that is not the case. You can also see the extent to which revenues and expenses have grown over the 10-year period, which what the chart shows is that since about 2010, neither have grown very much, and in fact, during much of that period of time, expenses were decreasing yearly. We ended the year with $334.4 million of revenue and $338.4 million worth of expenses. We can also determine where the county has been placing its emphasis over the past 10 years by looking at the change of expenses over that 10-year period by function, and what this chart shows is the amount of increase or decrease of expenses in 2018 versus the 10 years previous, 2009. The greatest source of increase for the county expenses over that 10-year period has been public safety at $21.04 million. That's kind of what we would like to see, considering that the Board of County Commissioners has consistently said that their highest priority is public safety. Public Works is another area where the Board of County Commissioners has placed a priority. And over this 10-year period, Public Works expenditures increased $6.88 million. Culture and recreation expenses increased $1.8 million over that same 10-year period. General governmental activities increased $6.6 million from 2009 to 2018, and health and welfare experienced a substantial decrease in expenses over that same 10-year period, nearly $12 million less than what was spent on health and welfare activities in 2018 than in 2009. That's a function of budget reductions that were made primarily in 2012 when the health and welfare activity incurred a 6.7% budget cut, and during this period of time there have been reductions in staffing at ComCare and Aging. Additionally, in CDDO, there was a reduction in the amount of state support for the CDDO activities. All of these changes amount to the decrease in total spending for health and welfare. Within our revenues, I've talked before about the expectation the activities generate as much program revenue as possible to pay for their own way so that we don't have to levy general taxes on the citizens. And what this chart shows is 10 years of history of property tax revenue represented by the blue line and program revenue represented by the green line. Property tax was nearly $15 million higher at $172.62 million versus $157.67 in 2009. Over the 10-year period, program revenue decreased 2010 through 2013. There were also decreases in program revenue pretty consistently. During that period of time, property taxes took a slight dip, but stayed essentially consistent over that 10-year period. As a result, at the end of the 10-year period in 2018, property taxes now are substantially higher than program revenue. $172.6 million versus $118.8 million. And so what this chart shows is that over the past 10 years, the county has become increasingly reliant on property taxes as the principal funding stream to pay for county services. Because we're so reliant on property taxes, we pay a lot of attention to the collection rate. How effective are we at collecting property taxes that have been levied? This chart shows 10 years of history for collection rates. At its very worst over this 10-year period in 2009, the county collected 95.7% of all taxes that have been levied. In other words, unpaid taxes represented less than 4.5% of the total levy. That was the worst that we have performed over this 10-year period. You see that the collection rate from that low point in 2009 has steadily increased. And at 2017, and we're talking here about tax years, so the 2017 tax year funded the 2018 budget. We don't yet have the 2018 tax year data. So the 2017 tax year ended with a collection rate at 97.74%, the highest collection rate that we have on record. And so this suggests the treasurer has been doing a very effective job of collecting property tax, which is very important for us because that's our primary source of funding for the county government. Finally, I want to talk about long-term debt, and what you see on this chart is 10 years of history for the county's outstanding debt. Each year represented by a bar, and within each bar, or within each year, there are different colors representing different categories of debt. In 2018, the county had $50.9 million of general obligation debt. That's the green at the bottom. We had $2 million of special assessment debt. That's the thin blue line immediately above the green line. We had $94.5 million of PBC debt. We had a very slight amount, about $0.7 million of lease debt, represented by fire apparatus, and that's the black line at the very top of the chart. What this chart shows is that the general obligation debt of the county has decreased steadily since its peak in 2012 at $86.8 million, down to $50 million now. The PBC debt also started decreasing in 2012 and 2013, but then spiked again in 2014. That was caused by a refunding that we did in that year. So we sold additional debt for the refunding, and it was caused by the PBC's funding of a building for Wichita State University on the new Innovation Campus. The debt, as I have stated previously, will only be repaid with the proceeds of the special property tax that is levied for WSU, and so it's not a general county obligation. And with that, I will let Rick talk about the operating indicators.
Okay, so I get to end with the fun things, the fun measures that we look at and how the services were delivered to the citizens of Sedgwick County. So I'll just run through these last few slides relatively quickly, and I'll start with public safety. And what these charts are going to show you is the level of service in 2018, a change from last year, 2017, and then the difference or a 10-year change from 10 years ago. So as we begin, the average number of 911 calls per month were 41,973 calls. And that's a 5% decrease from last year, but a 9% increase from 10 years ago. Then we look at the average number of EMS responses per month, and that's 5,300, a 2% increase from a year ago, and a 28% increase from 10 years ago. The average daily juvenile population in detention was 53. That's a 2% increase from last year, but a 50% decrease from 10 years ago. Then we look at the daily population in the sheriff's custody. That was 1,421, a 2% decrease from last year, and a 14% decrease from 10 years ago. And that was all done with 1,419 public safety employees, and that's 1% less than a year ago and 8% less than 10 years ago. Here we look at the fire service, and the number of residential structure fires per 100,000 households was 210. That's an 11% increase from a year ago and a 25% decrease from 10 years ago. And we look at the average number of medical responses per month. That was 387, a 5% decrease from a year ago, but a 56% increase from 10 years ago. And all that was performed with 9 fire stations, and that's the same amount as a year ago and 10 years ago. Health and welfare service. The number of mental health clients that were seen was 13,132, a 3% decrease from last year, but a 10% increase from 10 years ago. The number of eligible for developmental disability services was 2,538, a 1% increase from a year ago, and an 11% increase from 10 years ago. And that was performed with 500 employees, and that's 4% more than a year ago, but 19% less than 10 years ago. In public health service, the number of clinic patient encounters was just over 130,000. That's an 8% decrease from a year ago and 31% decrease from 10 years ago. They provided just over 24,000 immunizations, and that's a 23% increase from a year ago, but an 11% decrease. And the number of tuberculosis encounters was 1,986, and that's a decrease of 35% from a year ago and 58% 10 years ago. In Culture and Rec Services, the annual attendance at the zoo was 504,000, or just over 504,000, and that's a decrease of about 13% from a year prior, and a 23% decrease of 10 years ago. Annual attendance at Sedgwick County Park was just short of 1 million visitors, and that's a 3% decrease from a year prior, and a 6% decrease from 10 years ago. And they provide Culture and Rec Services at those activities with 107 employees, and that's a 1% increase from a year ago and 16% less employees than 10 years ago. Here are the numbers for the Intrust Bank Arena. The number of events that were held in 2018 was 84 events, and that's 3% less than the prior year. However, annual attendance was up 4% and 352,285 attendees. The Pollstar ticket sales ranking, and that's a ranking of all arenas in the United States, our ranking is 57th, and that's 4% better than the year prior. And the profit return to the county since opening is $2,564,849, a 5% increase. And the reason you don't have 10 years of data is because I believe that next year is their 10-year anniversary. In Public Works, the number of road miles that were improved was 106 miles in 2018. That's a 26% decrease from 2017, but a 74% increase from the 10 years prior. The number of road miles maintained was 609 miles. That's a 2% increase, but a 1% decrease from 10 years prior. The number of household hazardous waste tons disposed was 599 tons. That's an 8% decrease from the year prior and 15% more than 10 years prior. And all that work was accomplished with 127 Public Works employees, 2% more than the year prior and a 4% decrease over the 10 years. And in general government service, the number of registered voters in Sedgwick County was 303,571, and that's an increase both over a 1-year and a 10-year period. The number of real estate taxable parcels was just over 215,000, and that was less than a 1% increase over a year and about a 1% decrease over a 10-year period. And you see the number of documents filed with the Register of Deeds was just over 71,000. Again, that's a decrease of 6% over 1 year and a decrease also over a 10-year period. Then also the number of real estate records processed, 73,000, a 2% reduction and a 7% reduction respectively. And the number of general government employees that provided that service was 404 employees, a 1% reduction or 1% less than 1 year and a 15% reduction from 10 years prior.
Thank you, Rick.
I guess I don't have a questions slide, so.
You don't have a question slide, so I guess we can't ask any.
Yes, sir.
Do I have any questions for Rick or Hope? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where do I begin? Just kidding. No, I wanted to talk to you before the meeting today because I do have a few questions, but I do appreciate the presentation. You did a great job, and let me congratulate you on the CAFR. I think it's extremely well done, and I just want to reflect on this is I think the fifth one of these I've seen since I've been a commissioner, and it seems like the number of problems that we recognized in previous CAFRs has continued to go down, and this is, I think, probably the healthiest audit we've seen since I've been a commissioner. So commend all the staff and management for all you have done to make corrections and create such a glowing report, frankly. sort of tremendous. And I have a couple little questions on the CAFR. We'll get with you on that one later. But in terms of this PowerPoint presentation, just a couple quick questions. On slide 8, there's a couple of blue lines that show up in 2017 and 18, 2.3 million and 3.5 million. Can you remind me what those are? And a couple of things that showed up.
On which slide again?
On slide number 8, the restricted 2.3 and 3.5 million.
Isn't that what we put aside to buy a building from the sale of, or from the bonds on Reagan Building, and also the sale of the dog track?
Answer your question.
That's for MABCD.
Oh, that's MABCD?
Yes, for the restricted.
I thought we restricted money for Reagan Building.
I will defer to Lindsay on this.
She wants to talk.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Commissioners. Lindsay Peruso, CFO. So when the county became the managing partner for MABCD, we knew that those revenues would have to be deposited in our general fund. So as we had talked about yesterday during our property tax lid briefing, there are a number of funds, and because we're a county, we're only authorized to have certain funds. We are not authorized to have a special fund for MABCD. So all of those revenues then are deposited in our county general fund. And so we were able to work with our auditors to say that we can restrict those dollars for MABCD purposes, so that even though it's in the general fund, it can't be used on any other general fund expenses. Now, we did earmark dollars for the administration building, and so that $3 million was represented as an expense on the budget side, but a transfer here just between funds on the entity-wide statements. So I hope that clarifies.
I think I understand that. So those reserve funds for future capital improvement, SA admin building or whatever, is that shown on the ending balance page?
It would
be. Is it buried in there as well?
But again, it's within the funds of the county, and so while on a budgetary basis we would show as an expense to the general fund, because it's happening within the organization, it's not necessarily showing as until we really spend it on the building, it won't be reflected in our financials.
Very good. So on slide number 14, there's been a less reliance on state and federal governments, which I think is what I would have assumed. But I would assume this is two things that are happening here. Number one, our budget's growing a little bit. Number two, they're making decisions not to provide revenues to the local government here. So we're not making a conscious choice to accept less money here. The number's going down because they're making decisions not to provide the funds relevant to our own budget, which is growing a little bit. It causes this line to trend downward. Is that correct? Okay. On slide number 17, I don't have a legend, but I see blue and red both above and below the line. Can you please explain the red and blue? What's the scale on the y-axis? It's in percentages, but what is that exactly?
So what that measures is the statement of activities. And again, you're looking at the entity-wide statements, where all of the statements are rolled into one set of books. So it's not segregated into the different funds. So so when we start looking at the different measures, it's like when we talk about budgetary basis versus GAAP basis. So now we're talking about segregating out traditional fund statements where they're all segregated into their own. This is everything rolled together. So the red on that chart shows that we had more expenses than revenue when you roll all of those together.
Okay.
So we're not looking at them individually. It's not, I mean, it looks like it's a bad measure because it's red and it's below the 0% line. But when you take into account, just like your previous question is we have grant funds that are reducing, right? So there's less revenue coming in. So this rolls everything together. Does that answer the question?
It does, except for, like, for example, in 2010 and 2011, I see a blue line, which would be, I guess, a good color, but it's over 3% negative. So
fair statement.
It's a little confusing. The chart doesn't have a legend, and there's it doesn't define the Y scale, so I wasn't sure what that meant. But on slide number 16, never mind. I think I already answered my own question on that one. Never mind. I apologize. Let's look at slide number 25. There's been a discussion we've talked about before about what's our total collection rate. And again, I would assume that these numbers here are first-year collections.
Yes.
If you add in subsequent year collections and you look at this over time, I think we're much closer to 99% in every year.
Yes.
Would that be is that data available somewhere? Because that would be really.
We can get that data for you.
This data by itself makes it look like we ought to do something here, or maybe we have done something here. But I would just say this: I as a commissioner want to be very gracious in allowing people a little bit of time to come up with their property taxes if they're struggling, before we get aggressive and start taking property away. And I know there's been some discussion in the past about shortening the. There's been some discussion in the past about shortening the amount of time we're gracious and allowing them to pay those taxes.
The numbers that you're looking for are on page E11 of your CAFR.
Oh, very good. I'll get to that in just a minute. So
that data is in here. And so your comment is this is first year collections, but the subsequent your data is on page E11.
E11?
Yes.
Real quickly, let me just get over there real quick. The reason I bring this up again is that there's been a debate whether or not we ought to be more aggressive in our effort to collect this delinquent tax. And by the way, if someone does pay delinquent tax, they pay interest on top of the delinquent tax. So there's a penalty essentially, right? Okay. Okay, that answers that question very well. Thank you. I think that's really my main questions. I'll just stop with that for now. I'll get with you later if I have other questions. Thank you for the report. You did a very good job, and I would like to make a motion that we receive and file a report.
Thank you. We have a motion, and we'll second the motion. Commissioner Meitzner.
Thank you. Since this is kind of my first rodeo on this, I was questioning on slide 9 the unrestricted fund balance will be equal to 20% of budgeted annual expense. Is that a state rule? Is that our rule, self-imposed?
Self-imposed. It's our rule, right, Lindsay?
20%?
There's no state requirement for that.
Has that been consistent for a long time?
Yes.
The 20%? So that hadn't changed?
No.
That's just been a goal for a long time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
And we exceed that by 6%.
Right. I see that. And I guess historically it's been above the 20?
Yes.
Okay. Congratulations. Thank you for clarifying. That's all my questions.
Do you have another question?
No, that's all.
I don't see any other questions. I guess that you and Hope did a good job today. You good?
Yep.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
And we can have some people back on the 8th floor again. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Mr.
Madam
Chairman.
Clerk, next item, I'm sorry.
Item S, report of the Board of Bids and Contracts regular meeting on May 2nd, 2019.
Now, good morning, Joe.
Well, good morning again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Joe Thomas, Purchasing Director. We have 5 items from the meeting of the Board of Bids and Contracts on May 2nd that we seek your approval on. Our first item is the Prevention Early Intervention Services for Department of Corrections. This recommendation is to accept the proposals and execute service provider agreements with TOWNSHIP Incorporated, doing business as Higher Ground for $100,000, Kansas Big Brothers Big Sisters for $35,331, Center for Behavioral and Academic Research for $145,686, the Pando Initiative for $66,784, and Ember Hope Incorporated, doing business as Ember Hope Youthville for $138,344.31. Our second item is the SAP SMS text for the Enterprise Resource Planning. Our recommendation is to accept the quote from SAP Public Services Incorporated, and this is in the amount of $97,800. Item 3 is our dental supplies for the Health Department, and this recommendation is to accept the overall low pricing from Dental Health Products Incorporated as shown in the table, and establish contract pricing for 2 years with 2 one-year options to renew. Item number 4 is Sedgwick County's Adult Detention Facility, the Office and Entry Expansion Remodel Project for project services. And this recommendation is to accept the low bid from Harmon Huffman Construction Group Incorporated. And this is in the amount of $4,570,000, and also to establish contract unit pricing as shown above. And our final item, Commissioners, is the Employee Medical and Pharmacy Benefits, Human Resources. And our recommendation is to accept the proposal from United Healthcare for a first-year cost of $711,568.80, and to execute a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options to renew. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have, and I recommend approval of these items.
Hey, Joe, do we have any questions? I know each of the commissioners has been briefed on each of these items. I don't see any questions. I move that we approve the recommendations of the Board of Bids and Contracts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tom Stolz with the Manager's Office. Recommend approval of consent items T through AH.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we approve Tango through Alpha Hotel with the exception of whiskey.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Madam Clerk, call item whiskey.
Resolution amending certain Sedgwick County personnel policies.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Chairman, under item W, there were 2 policies coming forward. One was a cleanup of the sexual harassment policy for Sedgwick County, consolidating that topic into a single policy and deleting another. I don't think there's any controversy in that. It's a good, clean policy. The second policy was our bereavement policy, and there was 2 main components in our bereavement policy that we were trying to address. One was to bring consistency across county departments on how supervisors were allowing bereavement to be used by definition. And the second component was to increase bereavement leave from 3 days to 5 days to make us more consistent with other government entities and private business. The controversy around this policy has to do with the moving the number of days of bereavement from 3 to 5. I don't think there was any problem with cleaning up the usage of the policy within the county. On later this month, Sheena Smuts, our HR director, will talk to you about employee compensation very generally and broad scoped. Part of that discussion has to do with how we compensate and how we give people time off. Currently, we give vacation and sick time, and there is some interest in looking at PTO or personal time off in lieu of vacation and sick. All of this ties back into bereavement as well, and we think it might be best to defer this component of the bereavement policy until that discussion has a chance to be analyzed. So I would like to, for you all to pass the sexual harassment policy today, that first policy under item W, defer bereavement, which we will bring back within a week or 2, cleaning up the consistency of language part, but leaving out the extension from 3 to 5 days until PTO is analyzed later this summer. That makes sense.
Very good. I'd like to take the recommendation of the manager and make a motion that we approve the sexual harassment policy and defer the policy on bereavement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support the motion. I just wanted to ask, because I'm reading the resolution, and there's something in here about bloodborne pathogens, and there's actually a section here on that as well. It might be cleaner just to say we passed the resolution minus the bereavement policy, so it's clear that everything else in this resolution
Thank you
would
for
be
bringing
passed.
that up,
Would that be
Commissioner.
okay?
There is another attached policy. That's my mistake. Instead of 2, there was actually 4. Is it correct? There's 4 policies, so we'd like to pass the 3.
And I have no problem with the other 3. I'd like to just pass the entire resolution minus the bereavement policy.
Very good. I would like to amend my motion to pass all the policies with the exception of bereavement. And is that okay with
Yes,
the second?
I will second the amended.
We have a corrected motion and a second.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? No. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call item whiskey.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Legislative issues.
Mr. Papoon, what you have today?
Commissioners really don't have very much. The legislature wrapped up last weekend in the early hours Sunday morning, and as far as anything else relating to the county, I don't think we have anything to discuss at this time.
Thank you. We probably need just a little feedback at the end now, showing where we ended up with our legislative agenda, so that we can state that we would like some of those back on the next legislative agenda, since we didn't get where we needed to be. So we probably ought to have a little bit of wrap up here in the near future, if we could. Any other questions on legislative agenda? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, next item.
Other.
Commissioner Cruz.
So I don't want to make an even already meeting long, but I have a few things that I'd like to address. So we get a limited amount of time on this earth. I get a limited amount of time in this chair. I've been thinking about the events that happened this weekend, both the incredible Open Streets No More event and the tragic events that keep taking place in our community. The beginning of April, it was 4 suicides in 1 week, and a horrible car accident this past week that took 2 lives. And, you know, it's time. Time is the only thing you can't get back, and it's the only thing you can't buy. Minutes turn to hours, hours turn to days, days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months, and months turn to years. Rosie McElroy got 12 years on this earth. We don't have any more time to wait. We have to start paying attention to why these tragedies keep happening. We have to take action. We have to set goals, and we have to work to achieve those goals. What has rocked our community this past weekend didn't have to happen. We can all sit and debate about why these tragedies took place. We can all point fingers. Excuse me, this is an emotional thing for me. We can all sit and debate again, but at the end of the day, drugs, meth played a role in this tragedy. Meth played a role in at least one of those suicides that happened in April as well, and probably countless other things. The bottom line is, Rosie McElroy and Maria Wood are dead because of drugs. I tried not to cry, but here I go. Jenny Wood is fighting for her life because of drugs. This problem affects us all. I want you all to stop and think about your circle of people for a quick second. Think about those people in your life, your children, your parents, your friends, your family, your coworkers, and your colleagues. Think about the people you drive by on Broadway or the people sleeping on any street downtown. Now, I'm not generally a betting type, but if I had to bet, I bet you know someone who is struggling with an addiction of some kind. You know someone who has thought about suicide, or you know someone who has died because of suicide. You know someone who drinks a little too much, a little too often, and maybe it's you. These addictions are real. These suicides are real. This tragic accident is real. These problems don't go away just because we don't have the courage to talk about them. Brushing things under the rug only makes mountains in which we have to climb over. And if any of you have ever tried to climb a mountain, you know how challenging it can be. I say this to you all today to make it loud and clear that we have a crisis in our community. We have too many people addicted to drugs and alcohol. We have too many people who are dying by their own hands. And why? It doesn't have to be this way. Monday night, we held a vigil for Jenny, Rosie, and Maria and their families. And what I witnessed, in less than 6 hours, just by spreading the word through social media, text messages, and phone calls, in less than 6 hours, we were able to gather hundreds of people together. We gathered together because we all wanted to do something, but we just didn't know what to do. That is real power. The power in knowing that when we want to do something And when we want to spread a message of love and kindness, we can do it, because we did it Monday night. Our community does not need to be suffering. People do not need to use drugs and alcohol to cope with their problems. I say this to you all today for a couple of reasons. Number one, what showed me Monday night was what kindness, compassion, and empathy look like. We have to get back to basics. We have to be kind to each other. Why do people abuse drugs and alcohol? To cope. To cope with whatever it is they need to cope with in whatever manner and method possible. Now, I know this seems like an oversimplification, but we have to get back to basics. In this me driven society we find ourselves in, we have to start paying attention to people. We have to get back to kindness, compassion, and empathy. I can't say it enough. So instead of walking in a QT, checking your Facebook feed, look up at the people sitting on the wall and say hello. Give them a smile. We have to start paying attention to the people right in front of us. Not just the people you like, but everyone. What is the saying? Be kind, for everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. This is something tangible we can start doing right now, as soon as we walk out these doors. The second reason I'm saying this all to you is because as policymakers and as those who allocate the resources in our community, I must ask, what are our priorities? I heard just now, and how appropriate it is today, that a couple of years ago we put public works as a priority. And we fell 6.7% in staff reductions, 1 in calm care. So over the next few months, we're going to decide what programs and services get funds and what services and programs don't get funds or additional resources. Now, I'm learning here, but I'm fully aware that nothing happens overnight. But if we don't start now, if we don't start this budget cycle in 2020, when will we start? Mental health, and more broadly behavioral health, was the top part of our legislative platform this year. And despite all the efforts that went into rallying our state lawmakers, no real traction, no tangible traction was made here locally. We, as the Sedgwick County Commissioners and as the Board of Public Health, have a responsibility to make mental health, behavioral health, addiction services, suicide prevention a priority in 2020. My heart breaks for the McElroy family. My heart breaks for Jenny Wood, who lost her mom and is now fighting for her life. She has been a real inspiration to me, not only because she can whistle and I can't, but because I see her drive and her courage to follow her gifts. She is so very gifted in many ways. It takes gut and grit to be a musician, to open your soul as an artist, to open yourself up so others can feel. It takes courage. I feel very honored to call her my friend. To the students, teachers, and staff at Robinson Middle School, my heart goes out to each and every one of you. Losing a classmate and a student is something you should never have to deal with. I was so very touched to see all of you who came to the vigil on Monday night, and I'd like to read you this poem by Mary Elizabeth Fry. It's titled, Always With You. Do not stand at my desk and cry, I am not there, I did not die. I am the laughter filling the halls, my spirit lingers in the walls. I am the bell that rings each day, my memory, a reminder that we still play. I am the knowledge learned and gained, a soul continuing each day unchained. When you enter school in the morning rush, I am the moment the teacher says, hush. Do not loathe these days, I am never very far away. And finally, to our first responders, I am truly in awe of what each and every one of you do. Saturday, I got a little taste of what you do. To handle the things that you do on a daily basis, you are the everyday heroes of our community. You are brave, you are courageous. When most would panic, you dive in, focused and calm to handle the crisis in front of you. You all are incredibly smart, and your courage and dedication to your profession and this community is inspiring. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for sacrificing on a daily basis, and I mean it when I say you are truly the real heroes of our community. So I'll wrap up this by saying, I know we can never 100% fix the problems in our community, but we can start this year by focusing our goals at budget time on things that really matter. And the things that really matter in this community are the people. The citizens who live here, the citizens who work here. They are the people who matter, and they should be our priority. Start today by being kind to a stranger. You never know how you might change the course of their day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cruz. I know that you have a lot of passion for what you just spoke about, and we appreciate that. I think that the Commission has recognized the issues that you brought up, or we wouldn't have made behavioral health our #1 priority. I probably believe what we were lacking when we put that together was the passion that you've shown today, and I appreciate that. I think that words that you've said today and the feelings and the commitment will probably make a great difference as we move forward. I know the Commission, and I have to admit that I'm not as passionate as you are about different issues, but we recognize those issues. If we wouldn't have added a new position for a health coordinator, for both a health coordinator, a comm care coordinator, a drug and alcohol abuse coordinator in the jail. We've made trips down to San Antonio. I know you're going to have an opportunity to go in June. We recognize these issues. I guess what we didn't recognize is that we need to add more passion to make sure that other people recognize, because we failed, I think, at the legislature this year on getting our issues before the public. So thank you for your passion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, and Lacey, thank you for that. That was very touching, and I agree with Commissioner Dennis that we need to talk about it more, but I think the crisis is we didn't fail. It's that the legislators are unable to talk about something else when education takes up 90% of their time and 60% of the state budget. I've talked to many of them, and they say, well, we care about it, but we're not being sued to fund it more. So if we want to find funding, it's probably going to have to come from us. But I don't believe we failed. I just believe there's mandates that says the public schools are more important than public health. And that's a different discussion, but I just don't want, I don't want that out there that Commissioner Dennis or anybody else thinks we failed. I just believe there's transition in administrations. We had made a lot of progress with Governor Collier when he was governor, and I think now it's our responsibility to get the Kelly administration to help. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments under other? Seeing nothing. Next item, please.
Executive session.
I don't believe we have a requirement for an executive session today. Therefore, I'd like to adjourn the Board of County Commissioners meeting for May the 8th. And at this time, I'd like to call to order the governing body of Fire District Number 1 for May 8th. Madam Clerk, next item.
Roll call. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Present.
Commissioner Cruz.
Present.
Commissioner Howell.
Present.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Present.
Chairman Dennis.
Present. Next item, please.
Public agenda.
Does anyone in the audience wish to speak on the public agenda for the governing board of Fire District Number 1? Seeing no one, next item, please.
Consideration of minutes. Item A, fire meeting minutes of April 3rd, 2019.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All the commissioners have had an opportunity to review the minutes from April 3rd, April 17th, and a special meeting on April 19th. I know that all commissioners were present on the 3rd and the 17th. Commissioner O'Donnell was absent on the 19th. However, he has had an opportunity to review the minutes. I make a motion that we approve all three.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Tom Stolz with the Manager's Office. There are 2 consent items on the fire agenda. One, we'd like you to approve item E, which is the hiring of the fire chief above minimum salary, and item D is the same batch of policies that we considered under the general agenda, and we'd like the same consideration for this policy where we can pull out bereavement, but approve the other 3.
Thank you. Now let's take them one at a time. I move that we approve item Echo on consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. And do you want to call item Delta?
Resolution amending certain Sedgwick County personnel policies.
Thank you. I'd like to make the same motion we made last time, that we approve all of the personnel policies with the exception of bereavement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Meitzner.
Aye.
Chairman Dennis.
Aye. Next item, please.
Executive session.
I do not see any reason to have an executive session today. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to bring before the fire board? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Thank you all.